Captain Du Young Park had never felt smaller than she did right now. She stood in the center of the massive Galactic Council chamber. The room was bigger than 3 football fields put together. Its walls reached so high that she had to bend her neck all the way back to see where they ended. The walls were made of a special crystal that changed colors every few seconds, going from deep blue to soft purple to gentle green. 200 alien representatives sat in rising circles around her, like a giant bowl with her at the bottom. Many of them were pointing at the thick folder she held in her hands. It contained Earth's application to join the Interstellar Defense Coalition. Some of the aliens were trying not to laugh. Others didn't even try to hide their amusement. Do Young kept her face calm, just like she had learned in her military training. But inside, she felt angry. These aliens thought humans were stupid just because Earth didn't have all their fancy technology. Next to her, Commander Taeho Kim stood just as still. His face showed no emotion, but she knew him well enough to see that his eyes were burning with silent anger. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," said Counselor Vex. He was a tall alien who looked a bit like an octopus standing up straight, with 6 tentacles that moved through the air as he talked. His skin was dark purple, and tiny lights flickered under it like stars in the night sky. "You humans want to join our military alliance. You think you can help protect our worlds." His voice got higher at the end, and several other council members started laughing again. "Yes, Counselor," Du Young said clearly. She kept her voice steady and professional. "Earth believes we have much to offer the coalition." Another council member leaned forward. This one looked more like a giant praying mantis made of crystal. "Your species hasn't even figured out how to make quantum shields yet. Your biggest ships still use regular metal for protection. And what about your engines?" A bird-like alien called out from higher up in the chamber. "You still burn chemicals to fly in your own atmosphere. My species stopped doing that 10,000 years ago." The laughter grew louder. Du Young felt her fingernails digging into her palms behind her back, but she didn't move. She had expected this reaction. In fact, Admiral Hejun Lee had told her it would happen exactly this way. She looked up at the visitors' gallery where he sat watching. He gave her the tiniest nod, so small that nobody else would notice it. Everything was going according to their real plan. "Perhaps," Du Young said when the laughter got a little quieter, "the Council would like to see our military technology report." She held up the folder. "Oh yes," Counselor Vex said, still making laughing sounds. "Please, show us your advanced technology." Do Young walked to the center platform. She opened the folder and pressed a button inside it. A huge image appeared in the air above her. It showed Earth's newest space carrier, the ENS Brave. The ship looked plain and simple compared to the alien vessels that floated outside the council building. The alien ships had shapes that seemed impossible, with parts that moved in strange ways and surfaces that glowed with energy. "As you can see," Du Young began, "the ENS Brave uses a reinforced titanium hull." She kept talking as more aliens started laughing, but she wasn't really paying attention to her own words. Instead, she was watching Admiral Hejun. He was looking at his wrist computer, pretending to check the time. On the other side of the galaxy, far from any alien sensors, something very different was happening. In a hidden facility deep under the Korean peninsula, Chief Engineer Sun Mei-kang stood in a massive underground dock. She was looking up at a ship that would make all these laughing aliens stop laughing very quickly. But they couldn't know about it yet. Not until the right time. The ship was called the U.S. Ghost. It didn't look impressive. In fact, it was hard to look at it at all. The ship's surface seemed to bend light around it, making it look blurry, like a smudge on a camera lens. The dock's bright lights seemed to slide off its hull instead of lighting it up. "How are the final tests going?" Sun Mai asked one of her team members. Lieutenant Jai Yunryu looked up from her computer screen. "The energy absorption rate is at 99.98%, she said with a proud smile. "No other ship in history has ever achieved that. The aliens think their quantum shields are amazing Because they can bounce back 95% of energy weapons. We don't bounce anything back. We take it all in. Sun Li nodded. She watched as technicians in special suits worked on different parts of the ship. The suits protected them from the Ghost's energy field. Without the suits, they would slowly get colder and colder as the ship absorbed their body heat. And the cloak? Sun Mai asked. Perfect, Jai Yun said. We tested it yesterday. We had 3 alien trade ships pass within 10 kilometers. Their sensors showed nothing. Not even empty space. Their computers just filled in what they expected to see there. Back in the council chamber, Du Yum was finishing her presentation. She had shown them everything they expected to see. Basic shields, simple weapons, normal engines, everything that would make them think humans were far behind their technology. Well, Counselor Vex said when she finished, that was interesting. More laughter filled the chamber. We will now vote on Earth's application to join the coalition. Do Young stood straight as the aliens voted. One by one, red lights appeared on the big screen. Each red light was a no vote. When all 200 lights were red, Counselor Vex spoke again. The vote is unanimous, he said. Earth's application is denied. Your technology is simply too primitive. You would be a burden to the coalition, not a help. Perhaps in a few hundred years, when you have advanced more. He waved one tentacle in a dismissing motion. Thank you for your time, counselors, Du Young said politely. She picked up her folder and walked out of the chamber with Commander Tahoe following her. They didn't speak until they were back on their ship, in Do Young's private office. The office had special devices that blocked any alien listening technology. They bought it completely, Tahoe said, finally letting himself smile. They think we're stupid primitives who barely know how to fly in space. Do Young sat down at her desk. Good. That's exactly what we wanted them to think. She pressed a button on her desk, and a secure communication line opened to Earth. Admiral Hajun's face appeared on her screen. Mission accomplished, Admiral, she said. The coalition has officially decided that we're too primitive to join them. Hajun smiled. Excellent work, Captain. Now the real mission can begin. Return to Earth immediately. It's time for Phase 2. After the call ended, Du Young looked out her office window at the alien ships flying around the Coalition's space station. They were beautiful, all shifting colors and impossible shapes. The aliens were so proud of their advanced technology. They thought they knew everything about space travel and war. They had no idea what was coming. They didn't know that humans had learned something important during their long history of warfare. Sometimes the best weapon isn't the most advanced one. Sometimes the best weapon is the one your enemy doesn't believe exists. The Ghost was almost ready. And soon, very soon, the aliens would learn why it was a bad idea to laugh at humans. As their ship turned toward Earth, Du Young thought about the real technology report, the one locked in a safe back on Earth, the one that showed what humans could really do when they worked together and thought in new ways. The aliens believed that better technology meant more complex technology. They had never thought about going in the opposite direction. The Ghost didn't use quantum mechanics or exotic particles. It used something much simpler. Nothing. Complete empty nothing. It was a ship built around empty space, a ship that didn't bounce back energy or deflect sensors. It just swallowed everything that touched it, like a hole in space. The aliens would learn about it soon enough, but by then it would be too late. Do Young smiled as Earth's ship moved away from the Coalition station. Behind her, she could still hear the aliens laughing. She wondered how long that laughter would last. Not very long at all, she thought. Not very long at all. 3 months after the Coalition rejected Earth, everything changed. The attack came without warning. The Drachnid Empire, a mysterious alien race from the far edge of the galaxy, launched their first strike against the Coalition. Do Young was in the hidden underground base in Korea when the news arrived. She watched the emergency broadcast with Sun Mai and Tayo. The huge screen showed coalition ships exploding one after another. The mighty alien fleet, with all its advanced technology, was falling apart. "How is this possible?" Sun Mai whispered. She stood closer to the screen, her eyes wide with worry. "The Drachnids shouldn't have weapons that can beat coalition shields. Their technology was always behind the coalitions. Unless someone helped them," Tahoe said quietly. He looked at Du Young. They both knew what this meant. Their secret project was now more important than ever. The screen showed more coalition ships trying to fight back. Their weapons looked beautiful, sending out beams of light in all colors. But the Drachnid ships just absorbed the attacks like they were nothing. The coalition's quantum shields, which they were so proud of, broke apart like glass. In the coalition's main command center, Counselor Vex was having the worst day of his life. His tentacles moved wildly as he watched another defense line break. "Impossible," he shouted. "Check the sensors again. They must be tricking us somehow." But the sensors told the same story every time. The Drachnids knew exactly how to beat every coalition weapon and shield. It was like they had a complete guide to coalition technology. "Sir," a young coalition officer said, "we're getting reports from all sectors. The Drachnids are using weapons we've never seen before, but somehow they look familiar." Vex knew what the officer meant. The Drachnid weapons did look familiar. They looked like coalition weapons, but stronger, more dangerous. Like someone had taken coalition technology and made it better. Back on Earth, in the underground base, Du Young walked through the giant hangar where the U.S. Ghost waited. The ship still played tricks with her eyes. Sometimes it looked solid, sometimes like a shadow, and sometimes it seemed to disappear completely. That was exactly what they wanted. "Status report," she called out to her crew. They were all wearing their special protective suits, working on different parts of the ship. Jia Yun looked up from her computer. "The absorption field is stable, Captain. We can now take in 99.99% of all energy that hits us. Nothing escapes." "What about the new weapons?" Du Young asked. "Ready for testing," Sun Mei answered. She pointed to a strange device on the ship's front. It didn't look like a normal weapon. It looked more like a lens or a mirror. "We call it the return sender. It stores all the energy the ship absorbs, and then," she smiled, "well, let's just say the Drachnids won't like what happens next." Do Young nodded. She remembered how the aliens had laughed at Earth's primitive technology. They thought humans were simple because they didn't use quantum physics or exotic particles. But humans had learned something different from their long history of war. Sometimes the simplest solutions were the best ones. The Ghost didn't try to block enemy attacks like coalition ships did. It didn't try to dodge them like Drachnid ships did. It just absorbed everything, like a black hole made of metal. And soon, it would give all that energy back. In space, the battle was getting worse. The Drachnids pushed deeper into coalition territory every hour. Their ships, which looked like giant dark crystals, destroyed everything in their path. Coalition planets called for help, but the coalition fleet was scattered and broken. On the coalition's main defense station, Counselor Vex called an emergency meeting. Representatives from all coalition worlds attended, either in person or through holograms. The same aliens who had laughed at Earth now looked scared. "The Drachnids have beaten our best defenses," Vex said. His voice shook a little. "They know all our weaknesses. They can counter every weapon we have. We need—" He stopped, his tentacles drooping. "We need help." In the back of the room, a human stood quietly. It was Sun Mei, Earth's representative to the coalition. She had been watching and listening to everything. She knew something wasn't right. The Drachnids were too perfect in their attacks. They knew too much. "Counselor," she said, stepping forward. The aliens turned to look at her. Some of them still had looks of doubt on their faces. "I think I know what's happening. The Drachnids aren't just good at fighting. They're not just lucky. They know exactly what you're going to do before you do it." "What do you mean, human?" asked one of the crystal-like aliens. Think about it, Sunlight said. They know how to beat every shield. They know where every fleet will be. They even know the secret codes for your communication channels. There's only one way they could know all that. The room got very quiet. Everyone understood what she was saying. Someone had given their secrets to the Drachnids. Someone in the Coalition was a traitor. Back on Earth, Du Young sat in her office in the underground base. She read the latest reports from the Coalition. Everything was happening just as Admiral Hajun had predicted. The Coalition was losing badly. Soon, they would have no choice but to ask for help. Her computer beeped. A message from Coalition headquarters appeared on her screen. She read it and smiled. Then she pressed a button on her desk. All crew to battle stations, she said into the speaker. This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill. Operation Ghost Strike begins in 6 hours. Throughout the base, lights turned red. Crew members ran to their positions. Engineers made final checks on the Ghost's systems. Weapons officers loaded special ammunition. Medical teams prepared their equipment. The Ghost was ready. The crew was ready. Now they just had to wait for the right moment. In his private chamber on the Drachnid command ship, the Drachnid Emperor watched recordings of the battles. His species looked like a mix between a dragon and an insect, with dark scales and multiple glowing eyes. He felt pleased. The Coalition was falling apart, just as planned. My lord, one of his officers said, our spies report that the Coalition is desperate. They are even thinking of asking the humans for help. The officer laughed. The primitives with their metal ships. The Emperor laughed too. Let them ask. What can these humans do? Their technology is a joke. They still use simple metal and basic engines. But somewhere in the darkness of space, a ship that wasn't supposed to exist was getting ready to prove him very wrong. The Ghost was about to show everyone that sometimes the best technology isn't the fanciest or most complicated. Sometimes the best technology is the kind your enemy doesn't believe in until it's too late. The real war was about to begin. The Ghost floated silently in space, completely invisible to every sensor in the galaxy. Inside the ship, Du Young sat in her captain's chair, watching the main screen. The screen showed a terrible sight. 3 Coalition worlds had fallen to the Drachnids in just 2 days. Status report, she said quietly. Her voice was calm, but her hands gripped the chair's arms tightly. All systems working perfectly, Jai Yun answered from her station. The energy absorption field is stable. Our power storage is at maximum capacity. She looked up from her screens with a small smile. We're ready, Captain. Taiho stood next to Du Young's chair, looking at a tablet computer. The Coalition's last defense line is breaking. They've lost contact with their forces in the outer systems. He shook his head slowly. They're losing this war faster than anyone expected. Du Young nodded. She pressed a button on her chair's arm. Engineering, how are we doing? Sun Li's voice came through the speaker. The return sender is ready, Captain. We've tested it 3 times. It works exactly as planned. There was a pause. But Captain, the amount of energy we can release, are you sure about this? I'm sure, Du Young said firmly. We'll only use it if we have no other choice. The return sender was their secret weapon. The Ghost didn't just absorb energy. It could save it and then send it back all at once. All the laser shots, all the plasma bolts, all the radiation that hit the ship. They could turn it all into one massive burst of pure energy. On the main Coalition defense station, things were getting desperate. Counselor Vex called another emergency meeting. This time, even more representatives attended through holograms because they were afraid to travel through space. We have confirmed it, Vex said, his tentacles moving nervously. Someone gave the Drachnids all our military secrets. Every shield frequency, every weapon design, every battle plan. They know everything. The room exploded with angry shouts and scared whispers. Sunmai stood in her usual place at the back of the room, watching carefully. She had been collecting information for weeks, putting together small clues, watching who talked to whom. "Do we know who the traitor is?" asked one of the crystal aliens. "Not yet," Vex answered. "But we're looking at everyone. No one is above suspicion." Sunmai noticed something interesting then. When Vex said those words, one of his tentacles twitched in a strange way. She had studied alien body language for years. That twitch meant something. She looked more closely at Vex. The Coalition's head counselor looked tired and worried. But was it really worry about the war? Or was it worry about something else? Sunmai remembered something from 3 months ago, when Earth had presented its application to join the Coalition. Vex had been the first to laugh, the first to dismiss humans as primitives. He had pushed hard to keep Earth out of the Coalition. At the time, she thought he was just being proud and stupid. Now she wondered if there was another reason. Did he want to keep Earth out because her thoughts were interrupted by a loud alarm? Red lights flashed throughout the station. A voice boomed through the speakers. "Emergency! Emergency! Drachnid fleet detected approaching Central Coalition space. All ships prepare for battle." The council room turned to chaos. Representatives ran for the exit or switched off their holograms. In the confusion, Sunmai saw something that made her blood run cold. Counselor Vex wasn't running. He wasn't even looking worried anymore. Instead, he was touching something in his pocket and smiling. Sunmai didn't wait another second. She slipped out of the room and ran to her private office. She had to send a message to Earth right away. Back on the Ghost, Do-young received Sunmai's message. She read it twice to make sure she understood everything. Then she called her senior officers to the ship's meeting room. "It's Vex," she told them, looking at each face around the table. "Sunmai is sure about it. He's been working with the Drachnids all along." "But why?" Jae-yun asked. "He's the head of the Coalition. He has everything he could want." "Power," Taeho said quietly. "The Drachnids probably promised him even more power. Maybe they told him he could rule this whole part of the galaxy for them." "That's not all," Do-young continued. "According to Sunmai's message, Vex did something else that makes this even worse." She touched a button, and a star map appeared above the table. He gave the Drachnids the codes to turn off the Coalition's quantum shields. All of them. At the same time, everyone in the room went very quiet. They all understood what this meant. Without their shields, the Coalition ships would be defenseless. The Drachnids could destroy them all in minutes. "When?" Taeho asked. Do-young looked at the clock on the wall. "In 2 hours. That's when the Drachnids will launch their final attack. And thanks to Vex, they'll be able to turn off every shield in the Coalition fleet at once." "They'll kill millions of people," Jae-yun whispered. "No," Do-young said firmly. "They won't, because we're going to stop them." She stood up and looked at her crew. "This is what we built the Ghost for. This is why we let them think humans were primitive and weak. So they wouldn't see us coming until it was too late." She walked to the star map and pointed to a spot. "The Drachnid command ship will be here, leading the attack. It's their biggest ship, twice the size of anything the Coalition has. They think nothing can touch them because they have all the Coalition's secrets." She smiled. "But they don't have our secrets. The Ghost's energy absorption field will protect us from their weapons," Sunmai said through the computer screen. She was still on the Coalition station, speaking to them secretly. "And the return sender. We'll give them a surprise they'll never forget." Do-young finished. "Start the launch sequence. We leave in 10 minutes. As her crew ran to their stations, Do-young looked out the meeting room window at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Drachnids were getting ready for what they thought would be their final victory. They had stolen the Coalition's advanced technology, turned one of its leaders into a traitor, and thought they had thought of everything. But they hadn't thought of the Ghost. They hadn't thought that while they were laughing at Earth's primitive technology, humans were building something completely new, something that didn't follow the normal rules of space warfare. The Ghost's engines started to warm up. They made no sound and gave off no energy that sensors could detect. The ship that didn't exist was about to change the course of the war. In his private chamber on the Drachnid command ship, the Emperor prepared for battle. His officers had told him everything was ready. Soon, Vex would send the signal, and all coalition shields would fail. Victory would be quick and complete. "My lord," one of his officers said, "should we worry about the humans? Some coalition ships have fled to Earth space." The Emperor laughed. "The humans, those primitives with their metal ships and chemical rockets. No, let them hide. We'll deal with them later, after we've destroyed the coalition. What can they possibly do to stop us?" He would learn the answer to that question very soon, and he wouldn't like it at all. The Drachnid command ship was enormous. It looked like a giant black crystal floating in space, bigger than any spaceship humans had ever built. Dozens of smaller Drachnid ships flew around it in perfect formation. They were getting ready for their final attack on the coalition. Inside the Ghost, Du Young watched the enemy fleet through special cameras. The Ghost was so close to the Drachnid ships that she could see the patterns on their hulls. But none of their sensors could detect the Ghost. To them, this part of space was completely empty. "Time check," Du Young said quietly. 20 minutes until Vex sends the shield-dropping signal," Taiho reported from his station. "All coalition ships will lose their protection at once." "Unless we stop it," Du Young said. She pressed a button on her chair. "Engineering, how's our energy storage?" "Full to the top," Sun Mai answered through the speaker. "We've been absorbing energy from the Drachnid ship's engines for the last hour. The return sender is ready." She paused. "Captain, this much energy. It could destroy everything within 10 kilometers. "That's the plan," Du Young said firmly. "We'll only get one shot at this." The Ghost moved silently through space, getting closer and closer to the Drachnid command ship. Its special hull absorbed all energy that touched it. Heat, light, radiation, everything. It was like a hole in space, a shadow that moved on its own. Jai Yun worked at her station, keeping the ship's systems perfectly balanced. 5 kilometers to target, she reported. Their sensors still show nothing. On the Drachnid command ship, the Emperor sat on his throne, waiting for the moment of victory. His large, insect-like eyes watched the tactical displays that showed his fleet's position. Everything was perfect. In a few minutes, Vex would send the signal, and all coalition defenses would fall. "My lord," one of his officers said suddenly, "there's something strange." "What is it?" the Emperor demanded. "I'm not sure," the officer said, looking confused. "The energy readings in Sector 7, they're dropping. Like something is absorbing our engine emissions, but there's nothing there." The Emperor stood up, walking to the main view screen. "Run a full sensor sweep," he ordered. But before the officers could obey, something impossible happened. A ship appeared out of nowhere, right next to their command ship. It seemed to fade into existence like a ghost becoming solid. On the Ghost's bridge, Du Young gave the order they had all been waiting for. "Disengage absorption field. Power up the return sender. Target their bridge." The Ghost's hull began to glow. All the energy it had absorbed over the last hour, all the heat, radiation, and engine emissions from the Drachnid ships, was about to be released at once. In the Coalition Command Center, Counselor Vex was reaching for the device that would send the shield-dropping signal. But before he could touch it, Sun Mai stepped out of the shadows behind him. "I wouldn't do that, Counselor," she said calmly. 2 Coalition security officers appeared beside her, their weapons ready. Vex's tentacles twisted in surprise. "What is this? How dare you threaten me? I am the head of the Coalition." "You are a traitor," Sun Mai said. She held up a small device. "And we have proof. Every message you sent to the Drachnids, every secret you sold them, we have it all." Vex's color changed from purple to gray, the alien equivalent of going pale. "But how? When?" Sun Mai smiled. Did you really think Earth's technology was primitive? While you were laughing at our simple machines, we were watching you, learning, waiting. Back in space, the Drachnid Emperor stared at the strange ship that had appeared next to his command ship. It was smaller than his ship and looked very simple, almost primitive. "Destroy that ship," he ordered. His gunners fired everything they had. Energy beams, plasma bolts, and quantum torpedoes shot toward the Ghost. But something incredible happened. None of the weapons hit. They all seemed to disappear just before touching the Ghost's hull. On the Ghost's bridge, Jai Yun watched her readings with excitement. Energy absorption at maximum. The return sender is fully charged. "Now," Du Young said quietly, "let's show them what primitive technology can do." She pressed a red button on her chair's arm. The Ghost's hull glowed brighter and brighter. All the energy it had absorbed, from the engine emissions, from the weapon shots, from everything, was gathered into a single point at the front of the ship. The return sender activated. A beam of pure white energy shot out from the Ghost. It hit the Drachnid command ship's bridge in less than a second. The beam contained more energy than 1,000 coalition weapons combined. The Emperor had just enough time to realize what was happening. These humans hadn't been primitive at all. They had tricked everyone. And now, the Drachnid command ship's bridge exploded. The explosion was so bright that sensors across the sector had to shut down to avoid damage. When the light faded, the front third of the massive ship was gone. Without their command center, without their Emperor, the Drachnid fleet fell into chaos. Some ships tried to fight. Others tried to run. But they had never trained for this situation. They had thought they were invincible. The Ghost's crew watched as coalition ships arrived from all directions, with Vex arrested and his signal device destroyed. The coalition ships still had their shields. They quickly surrounded the confused Drachnid fleet. "Send the message," Du Young ordered. Tai-Ho opened a channel to all ships in the area. Du Young stood up and spoke clearly. "This is Captain Du Young Park of the Earth ship U.S. Ghost. Your command ship is destroyed. Your leader is dead. Your fleet is surrounded. Surrender now, or we will demonstrate our primitive technology again." The Drachnid ships powered down their weapons one by one. In less than 10 minutes, the entire fleet had surrendered. Hours later, in the Coalition Council chamber, things were very different from 3 months ago. No one was laughing now. The aliens listened in complete silence as Du Young explained how the Ghost worked. "We didn't try to copy your quantum shields or exotic weapons," she said. "We went in a different direction. Sometimes the simplest solution is the best one. Our ship doesn't fight energy. It accepts it, stores it, and returns it." One of the crystal aliens raised a hand. "But why did you let us think you were primitive? Why show us fake technology?" Du Young smiled. "Because the best weapon is the one your enemy doesn't believe exists. You were so sure that advanced technology had to be complicated. You never thought that going simpler might make something better." The aliens looked at each other. Many of them remembered how they had laughed at Earth's application. Now they felt embarrassed. "The Coalition would like to reconsider Earth's application," one of the senior counselors said. Perhaps we have much to learn from each other." Du Young nodded. "We would be happy to join. And next time, maybe we can all remember that different doesn't always mean worse, and laughing at someone you don't understand is never wise." As she walked out of the chamber, Du Young thought about how things had changed. The aliens who had laughed at humans now looked at them with respect and a little fear. They had learned an important lesson. Never underestimate someone just because they do things differently. The Ghost had changed everything. And somewhere in space, other Earth ships were being built with the same technology. The aliens would never laugh at primitive human technology again. Sometimes, Du Young thought, the best way to win isn't to be the most advanced. Sometimes the best way to win is to be clever, patient, and willing to think differently. Humans had been doing that for their entire history, and now the whole galaxy knew it.